The Merchant's House is a timber-framed building, part of a row of similar properties built by the monks of Tewkesbury Abbey in the late 15th century. Now one of the earliest surviving property speculations of its kind in England, these buildings once provided living accommodation and business premises for merchants and their families. In the Tudor period, this small front room facing onto the street was the heart of a thriving family business, as our merchant now explains.
My household arose at 5 when the Abbey bells heralded the start of a new working day. My wife and daughter busied themselves with domestic duties, whilst I turned my mind to business. This was the shop where we made and sold our wares. It has large, solid shutters at the windows, which were secured during the night and folded out into the street during the day to display our goods. The streets were narrow and crowded with customers, all bartering with the wives of traders through the shutters to agree prices for goods. On market days, men and women shared the streets with animals and livestock, herded through the town by visiting husbandmen who worked the rest of the week in the fields. We hung signs outside our shops to advertise our goods, but, as many passers-by had never learnt to read, we used pictures and symbols that could be easily understood by all. If you look in the chest in the corner of the room, you will come across my reckoning cloth and jettons. These were used to tally up the accounts which my wife managed on my behalf. When the jettons were placed onto the cloth, they were equal to units of value, which were then added together to determine the amount owing. My wife and daughter worked alongside me, and when business was favourable, I could employ an apprentice to whom I could pass on my skills. No doubt you will come across him as you continue on your travels. He is an obedient boy, but be wary, for if you catch him at dice, or the worse from drink, be sure to report to me immediately.
Over the years, many tradesmen and craftsmen have lived and worked in these cottages, and in some of the properties evidence of bread ovens, ice houses, and even furnaces can still be found. One of our former residents remembers a time when the Row was still a hive of activity and trade.
Our premises were a bit different because half the premises was the pub, the other half was one part of the Abbey Church of England school. In the cottages, I suppose we were all about the same class. Across the road there was a mixture of people. There was someone who was a sort of master craftsman. There were doctors, school teachers. Because we got a regular customers, people who lived around. On the other side of the road there were two corner shops. Both the gentlemen from the two corner shops would come in for a drink. And Mr. Smith used to come in for a drink at lunchtime. I think he usually wore a flat cap, but he came in wearing what they called a pork pie hat one day, and they were all ribbing him about it. But, oh, well, haven't any of you got posh hats? So they all agreed one day to get out their best hats. I mean, we must have been mad at times if anybody had come in. Of course, in the war, when there were soldiers stationed in the school, first it was British soldiers, and then we had some Americans in. Some of those used to drop in. It was one of those places I think you could sit in the corner and listen to what was going on. Not as I did, because I wasn't old enough.
Now make your way back down the corridor and into the hallway to meet the merchant's wife, the real head of the household.